The morning sun cast long shadows across the grand courtyard of Buckingham Palace, as Lady Catherine Pemberton adjusted her pearl necklace for the third time. She had been the palace's chief protocol officer for nearly 2 decades, but today felt different. The weight of history pressed against her shoulders as she reviewed the final checklist one more time. "The flowers in the blue drawing room need to be repositioned," she murmured to her assistant, Margaret, who scribbled notes frantically on her tablet. "And remind the kitchen staff that President Mueller prefers his coffee black, no sugar." The German president's state visit had been planned for 18 months, every detail scrutinized and rehearsed until perfection seemed achievable. Yet Catherine knew from experience that state occasions had a way of creating their own drama, regardless of preparation. Across the palace, His Majesty King Charles was having his morning briefing with Sir Edmund Harwick, his private secretary. The king's study was filled with the soft scent of lavender from the gardens, but the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. "The president's delegation arrived at their hotel last night without incident," Sir Edmund reported, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "The security arrangements are comprehensive, and the weather forecast remains favorable for the ceremonial welcome." King Charles nodded thoughtfully as he sipped his tea from a delicate china cup that had served monarchs for generations. "This visit represents more than diplomatic courtesy, Edmund. Given the current state of European affairs, President Mueller's presence here sends a powerful message about the strength of our alliance." The king's words carried the weight of understanding that this was not merely a formal ceremony, but a carefully orchestrated demonstration of unity during uncertain times. The relationship between Britain and Germany had evolved dramatically since his mother's reign, transforming from wartime adversaries to essential partners in an increasingly complex world. Meanwhile, in the master of the household's office, preparations were reaching their final stages. Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth, who had overseen countless state banquets, was coordinating with the royal chef about the evening's menu. Every dish had been selected to honor German culinary traditions while showcasing British excellence. "The venison will be served with a wine reduction using a vintage from the royal cellars," she explained to her team. "The president particularly enjoys traditional British puddings, so we've prepared a selection including treacle tart and spotted dick." The palace staff moved with practiced efficiency through corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal hospitality. From the housemaids polishing the state dining room's crystal chandelier to the footmen rehearsing their movements for the formal presentation, everyone understood their role in creating a flawless experience. In her private apartments, Queen Camilla was selecting jewelry with her dresser, Mrs. Patricia Williamson. The Queen's approach to state occasions had always been thoughtful and diplomatic, understanding that her choice of accessories would be interpreted and analyzed by observers around the world. "The Cambridge emeralds would be appropriate," Mrs. Williamson suggested, holding up the magnificent necklace. "They complement the green silk gown beautifully, and emeralds have traditionally symbolized wisdom and growth." Queen Camilla studied her reflection in the ornate mirror, seeing not just herself but the continuation of a tradition that connected her to generations of royal women who had welcomed foreign dignitaries to British shores. Each state visit was a delicate balance of personal diplomacy and national representation. The German delegation's advance team had arrived 3 days earlier, working closely with palace security to ensure every aspect of the visit would proceed smoothly. Hans Weber, President Mueller's chief of staff, had been particularly impressed by the attention to detail and the genuine warmth of the British preparations. "They have remembered everything," he confided to his colleague during their final security briefing. "Even the president's preference for mineral water from a specific German region. This level of consideration speaks volumes about the importance they place on our relationship." Outside the palace gates, media crews from around the world were setting up their equipment, ready to capture every moment of the historic occasion. Royal correspondent Sarah Matthews had covered dozens of state visits throughout her career, but she sensed something special about this particular event. "There's an energy here today that feels different," she told her cameraman as they tested their equipment. "This isn't just about ceremony and tradition. There's a real sense that this visit matters in ways that go beyond the usual diplomatic protocols." The morning progressed with military precision as various departments completed their final preparations. The royal muse confirmed that the carriages were ready, their golden surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. The horses, magnificent Windsor greys, had been groomed to perfection, and stood ready to provide the spectacular transportation that had become synonymous with British royal occasions. Colonel James Mitchell, commanding the household cavalry, reviewed the ceremonial route one final time. His men had practiced the complex maneuvers repeatedly, but he knew that public occasions could present unexpected challenges, requiring quick adaptation and flawless execution. As the clock approached 10 o'clock, the anticipation throughout the palace became almost tangible. Servants made final adjustments to flower arrangements, security personnel completed their sweeps, and protocol officers confirmed that every detail was ready for the president's arrival. The transformation of Buckingham Palace for a state visit was always remarkable to witness. Rooms that served daily functions became stages for international diplomacy, their familiar furnishings suddenly invested with ceremonial significance. The grand staircase, where countless dignitaries had made their entrance, awaited another historic moment. Lady Catherine made her final rounds, checking that everyone was in position and properly briefed. Her years of experience had taught her that successful state occasions depended not just on grand gestures, but on hundreds of small details executed flawlessly by dedicated professionals who understood their vital role in Britain's diplomatic heritage. President Frank Mueller stepped out of his armored Mercedes at precisely 11 o'clock, his polished shoes touching British soil, with the gravity befitting such a momentous occasion. Behind him, the German delegation emerged in carefully choreographed sequence, each member aware that they represented not just themselves, but the entire German nation. The president paused for a moment, taking in the magnificent facade of Buckingham Palace. At 62 years old, he had attended numerous state functions throughout his distinguished political career, but standing before the most famous royal residence in the world still filled him with awe and responsibility. Magnificent as always, he murmured to his wife, First Lady Ingrid Mueller, who had chosen an elegant navy dress with subtle pearl accessories for the occasion. Her stylist had spent weeks researching appropriate attire that would show respect for British royal protocol while maintaining her distinctive personal style. The royal household's choreography was immediately evident, as footmen appeared with precise timing to assist with the delegation's arrival. Lady Catherine Pemberton approached with measured steps, her smile genuine yet professional, as she prepared to guide the German party through their first official moments on palace grounds. "Mr. President, Mrs. Mueller, welcome to Buckingham Palace," she said with a respectful curtsy. "Their Majesties are delighted to receive you for this historic state visit. If you would follow me, Their Majesties are w-wid. Their Majesties are delighted to state with 84 Forest," she said with a respectful curtsy. "We shall proceed to the grand entrance hall, where the formal welcome will take place." The interior of Buckingham Palace never failed to impress visiting dignitaries, but President Mueller was particularly struck by the seamless blend of historical grandeur and living tradition. Portraits of monarchs gazed down from gilded frames, while fresh flowers from the palace gardens provided vibrant splashes of color throughout the ornate corridors. King Charles and Queen Camilla waited in the grand entrance hall, positioned precisely where protocol dictated for the formal greeting of a head of state. The king wore his morning dress with characteristic elegance, while Queen Camilla's emerald green ensemble created a striking visual harmony with the room's magnificent decorations. "President Mueller, what a pleasure to welcome you to Britain," King Charles said as he extended his hand with genuine warmth. The handshake between the two leaders lasted precisely the appropriate duration, captured by photographers who understood they were documenting a significant moment in Anglo-German relations. Queen Camilla's greeting to First Lady Mueller was equally gracious, the two women exchanging pleasantries about the journey and expressing mutual anticipation for the events planned throughout the visit. Their conversation, though brief, established an immediate rapport that would prove essential for the success of the diplomatic occasion. The formal presentations followed established protocol as the German delegation was introduced to senior members of the royal household. Each introduction was brief but meaningful, acknowledging the important roles that staff members played in facilitating international diplomacy at the highest levels. Sir Edmund Harwick stepped forward to outline the immediate schedule, his precise delivery reflecting years of experience managing royal engagements. "Your Majesty, Mr. President, the ceremonial welcome is scheduled to begin in 30 minutes, followed by the private audience in the 1844 room." The timing was crucial, as hundreds of invited guests were already gathering on the palace lawns for the ceremonial welcome. Members of parliament, ambassadors, business leaders, and representatives from German community organizations in Britain had received the coveted invitations to witness this historic occasion. In the music room, the band of the Coldstream Guards was making final preparations for their performance. Their repertoire would include both the German and British national anthems, played with the precision and dignity that had made them renowned throughout the world for their ceremonial excellence. Drum Major William Hayes adjusted his magnificent bearskin hat and reviewed the musical program one final time. The band's performance would provide the soundtrack for a ceremony watched by millions around the world, and he was determined that their contribution would be worthy of the occasion's significance. Outside on the grounds, the final security sweeps were being completed as guests began arriving through the carefully managed entrance procedures. Detective Chief Inspector Rebecca Morrison coordinated the complex security arrangements that allowed for both public celebration and absolute safety for all participants. The media enclosure buzzed with activity as journalists prepared to broadcast the ceremony to international audiences. Royal correspondent Sarah Matthews positioned herself strategically to capture both the formal proceedings and the human moments that would give viewers insight into the personalities behind the diplomatic protocols. "This is clearly a visit of exceptional importance," she reported to her television audience. "The level of ceremony being accorded to President Mueller reflects not just courtesy, but a genuine desire to strengthen ties between two nations that share fundamental democratic values and face common challenges." Hans Weber, the president's chief of staff, coordinated final details with palace officials to ensure that every aspect of the ceremony would proceed according to plan. His attention to diplomatic nuances had helped President Mueller navigate complex international relationships throughout his tenure, and today's success could influence European politics for years to come. The palace guards took their positions with ceremonial precision, their scarlet uniforms and impressive bearing creating a visual spectacle that had welcomed countless world leaders to British soil. Each guardsman understood that they were not merely performing duties, but participating in a tradition that connected them to generations of soldiers who had served the crown. As the ceremonial moment approached, the atmosphere throughout the palace grounds became charged with anticipation. Invited guests found their designated positions, while staff members made final adjustments to ensure that every detail would contribute to an unforgettable experience. President Mueller and King Charles engaged in quiet conversation as they prepared to emerge for the public ceremony. Their discussion touched on shared interests in environmental conservation and cultural preservation, topics that would feature prominently in their more extensive private meetings scheduled for later in the visit. The sound of military bands tuning their instruments provided a musical backdrop as the final moments of preparation unfolded. Soon, the world would witness a ceremony that honored both tradition and the evolving relationship between two nations committed to democratic principles and international cooperation. The great doors of Buckingham Palace opened with ceremonial grandeur as King Charles and President Mueller emerged together onto the palace steps. The sight of two world leaders walking side by side created an immediate hush among the assembled crowd, followed by warm applause that reflected the genuine enthusiasm of the invited guests. The palace gardens had been transformed into a magnificent outdoor reception hall, with hundreds of dignitaries arranged in carefully planned sections that allowed everyone an excellent view of the proceedings. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the ancient trees, creating a natural cathedral for this diplomatic celebration. Ambassador Heinrich Zimmermann, Germany's representative to Britain, felt a deep sense of pride as he watched his president receive such an impressive welcome. His years of diplomatic work had built toward moments like this, where formal ceremony reflected genuine friendship between nations that had overcome their complex historical relationship. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the palace marshal in his distinctive voice that had introduced countless royal occasions, Their Majesties King Charles and Queen Camilla, and President Frank Muller and Mrs. Ingrid Mueller, of the Federal Republic of Germany. The band of the Coldstream Guards began their performance with the German national anthem, played with such precision and respect that many guests felt moved by the musical tribute to international friendship. President Mueller stood at attention, his hand over his heart, while his delegation joined in singing the familiar words with obvious emotion. Young Emma Hartmann, a 10-year-old student from the German school in London, had been selected to present flowers to Queen Camilla. Her nervous excitement was evident as she approached the queen with a carefully rehearsed curtsy, offering a bouquet of roses and lilies that had been specially grown in the palace gardens. "Thank you so much, my dear," Queen Camilla said with genuine warmth, accepting the flowers with a smile that immediately put the child at ease. "These are absolutely beautiful. You've done wonderfully today." The queen's gracious interaction with young Emma was captured by photographers and would later become one of the most memorable images of the entire visit, symbolizing the personal connections that transcended formal diplomacy. Dr. Margaret Thornton, a professor of international relations at Oxford University, had been invited to attend as recognition of her extensive research on European cooperation. Standing among the distinguished guests, she observed how the ceremony balanced traditional pageantry with contemporary diplomatic messaging. "This is statecraft at its finest," she reflected, noting how every element of the event was designed to reinforce the message of partnership and mutual respect. The careful choreography demonstrated Britain's commitment to maintaining strong European relationships despite changing political circumstances. The ceremonial inspection of the Guard of Honor provided a spectacular display of military precision as President Mueller, accompanied by King Charles, reviewed the troops who stood in perfect formation. Each soldier's uniform was immaculate, their movements synchronized with the precision that had made the British military ceremonial traditions famous worldwide. Captain David Morrison, commanding the Guard, had spent weeks preparing his men for this moment. As they presented arms in perfect unison, he felt the pride that came from knowing they were representing not just their regiment, but the finest traditions of British military excellence. The speeches that followed were brief but meaningful, with King Charles highlighting the shared values and common challenges that bound Britain and Germany together. His words emphasized cooperation on climate change, technological innovation, and the defense of democratic principles that both nations held dear. President Mueller's response was equally thoughtful, acknowledging the historical journey that had brought the two countries from conflict to partnership. His fluent English and obvious appreciation for British culture resonated strongly with the assembled guests, many of whom were hearing him speak publicly for the first time. Mrs. Ingrid Mueller engaged in animated conversation with several guests, including Lady Victoria Hartwell, a prominent supporter of German-British cultural exchanges. Their discussion about promoting educational partnerships demonstrated how diplomatic visits could foster practical cooperation beyond formal governmental agreements. The reception that followed the ceremony allowed for more intimate interactions between the German delegation and British dignitaries. Conversations flowed naturally between business leaders, exploring trade opportunities, academics discussing research collaborations, and cultural figures planning artistic exchanges. Sir James Pemberton, chairman of a major British engineering firm, found himself in fascinating discussion with Dr. Klaus Weber, a German technology executive, about joint ventures in renewable energy. Their conversation illustrated how diplomatic occasions often led to practical partnerships that benefited both nations economically. The palace staff moved seamlessly among the guests, ensuring that everyone felt welcomed and that conversations could develop naturally. Footmen circulated with champagne and canapés that showcased both British culinary traditions and German specialties, creating an atmosphere of shared celebration. Young Prince George made a brief appearance with his parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, charming the German guests with his polite greetings and obvious curiosity about their country. President Mueller was particularly delighted to meet the future king, presenting him with a specially commissioned children's book about German fairy tales. The afternoon's events demonstrated how modern royal diplomacy could blend ancient ceremonial traditions with contemporary relationship building. Every interaction, from formal speeches to casual conversations, contributed to strengthening the bonds between two nations that had learned to value their partnership. As the reception continued, the atmosphere remained warm and productive, with guests from both countries finding common ground on issues ranging from scientific research to artistic collaboration. The success of the ceremonial welcome had created an ideal foundation for the more detailed diplomatic discussions that would follow. The careful planning and flawless execution of the ceremony reflected the expertise of royal household staff, who understood that successful diplomacy often depended on creating environments where meaningful relationships could develop. Their behind-the-scenes work had produced an event that honored both protocol and the genuine friendship between Britain and Germany. The grandest moment of the state visit arrived as evening approached and the palace prepared for the state banquet. The state dining room had been transformed into a glittering showcase of royal hospitality, with the magnificent table set for 170 guests using the finest china, crystal, and silver from the royal collection. Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth supervised the final arrangements with the meticulous attention to detail that had made her legendary among diplomatic circles. Each place setting represented hours of planning, from the precise positioning of multiple sets of cutlery to the careful selection of flowers that would complement the evening's color scheme without overwhelming conversation. "The Sèvres porcelain service looks magnificent against the Irish linen," she observed to her assistant while making final adjustments to the centerpieces. "The combination creates exactly the right balance between grandeur and elegance that befits an occasion of this importance." The royal chef, Marcus Williams, had created a menu that celebrated both culinary traditions while showcasing contemporary techniques. The evening would begin with Scottish salmon prepared with traditional German accompaniments, followed by Welsh lamb with seasonal vegetables from the palace gardens, and conclude with a dessert inspired by both British and German sweet traditions. King Charles had personally reviewed the guest list, ensuring that the evening would bring together individuals who could contribute to strengthening bilateral relationships across multiple fields. The invitation list included government ministers, business leaders, scientists, artists, and representatives from charitable organizations that reflected both monarchs' interests. Dame Patricia Richardson, Britain's former ambassador to Germany, had been invited in recognition of her years of diplomatic service that had helped lay the groundwork for the current strong relationship. Her presence provided continuity with past efforts while symbolizing the ongoing nature of international friendship. The German delegation had changed into formal evening attire that reflected the significance of the occasion. President Mueller wore white tie with decorations that honored his public service, while First Lady Mueller had chosen an elegant gown in deep blue silk that complemented the sapphire jewelry she had selected for the evening. Queen Camilla's preparation for the state banquet was a carefully orchestrated process that balanced personal style with diplomatic messaging. Her choice of the diamond diadem and matching necklace created a stunning visual effect, while maintaining the dignity appropriate for receiving a head of state. The yeomen of the guard took their ceremonial positions throughout the palace as guests began arriving for the banquet. Their Tudor uniforms and traditional bearing created an atmosphere that connected the evening's celebration to centuries of royal hospitality that had welcomed countless world leaders to British soil. Lord Chamberlain William Ashton greeted each guest personally as they arrived, his extensive knowledge of protocol ensuring that everyone felt properly welcomed while maintaining the formal standards that state occasions demanded. His ability to remember personal details about hundreds of dignitaries had become legendary within diplomatic circles. The state apartments were illuminated to magnificent effect, with chandeliers casting warm light over paintings and tapestries that told the story of British history. Guests moved through reception rooms that had witnessed some of the most important diplomatic conversations of the past century, adding their own voices to that distinguished legacy. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a renowned historian specializing in Anglo-German relations, had been invited to attend as recognition of her scholarly contributions to understanding between the two nations. Her research had helped shape contemporary diplomatic approaches by providing historical context for modern challenges. The procession into the state dining room followed ancient protocol as King Charles escorted First Lady Mueller, while President Mueller accompanied Queen Camilla. Their measured pace allowed photographers to capture the dignity of the moment, while demonstrating the personal respect that had developed between the two couples. The toast proposed by King Charles was both eloquent and substantive, acknowledging the complex history that had brought Britain and Germany to their current partnership, while looking forward to future collaboration. His words resonated particularly strongly with guests who had lived through the transformation of European relationships. President Mueller's response demonstrated his deep appreciation for British culture and values, while outlining his vision for continued cooperation between their nations. His reference to shared democratic principles and commitment to international law received warm applause from guests who recognized the importance of such affirmations in uncertain times. The dinner conversation flowed naturally, as carefully planned seating arrangements brought together individuals who could benefit from meeting each other. Business leaders discussed potential partnerships, academics explored research collaborations, and cultural figures planned exchanges that would enrich both societies. Sir Michael Thompson, chairman of a major British charity focused on international development, found himself in productive discussion with Dr. Anna Richter, head of a German foundation working on similar issues. Their conversation led to immediate plans for coordinated programs that could multiply their impact through partnership. The musical entertainment provided by the Royal Philharmonic Chamber Ensemble created a perfect backdrop for the evening's conversations. Their performance included pieces by British and German composers, demonstrating how cultural traditions could be shared and celebrated simultaneously without losing their distinctive character. Young servers from the royal household moved with practiced grace between the tables, ensuring that each course was served with perfect timing while remaining nearly invisible to the guests. Their professional excellence reflected years of training in the demanding standards required for state occasions. The evening's success was evident in the animated conversations that continued long after the formal toasts had concluded. Guests lingered over their wine, reluctant to end discussions that had proven both enjoyable and productive, exactly as the organizers had hoped when planning the careful blend of personalities. As the banquet drew toward its conclusion, both King Charles and President Mueller could see that the evening had achieved its diplomatic objectives while creating genuine personal connections that would outlast the formal visit. The combination of magnificent setting, excellent hospitality, and thoughtful guest selection had produced an unforgettable celebration of international friendship. The final morning of President Mueller's state visit arrived with a sense of accomplishment and genuine sadness at the approaching farewell. Over the past 3 days, what had begun as formal diplomatic protocol had evolved into genuine friendship between the two families and their respective delegations. King Charles and President Mueller took an early morning walk through the palace gardens, away from the cameras and protocol officers, engaging in the kind of private conversation that often proved most valuable for international relationships. Their discussion ranged from personal interests in environmental conservation to shared concerns about global challenges facing democratic societies. These gardens have witnessed countless such conversations, King Charles observed as they paused beside a centuries-old oak tree. Some of history's most important decisions have been made during informal moments like this, away from the formal meeting rooms and ceremonial occasions. President Mueller nodded thoughtfully, appreciating both the historical significance of their location and the genuine warmth that had characterized every aspect of his visit. The relationships we build between our countries depend on personal trust as much as formal agreements. This visit has strengthened both dimensions of our partnership. Queen Camilla and First Lady Mueller had developed their own friendship during the visit, bonding over shared interests in literacy, promotion, and support for military families. Their morning conversation in the Queen's private sitting room covered plans for continued collaboration between their respective charitable foundations. "Your literacy programs for disadvantaged children are remarkable," Queen Camilla said, as she served tea from her personal collection. "I believe our foundations could learn much from each other's approaches, while adapting them to our different national contexts." The practical outcomes of the state visit were already becoming evident as various agreements and partnerships announced during the 3 days began moving toward implementation. Trade delegations had identified new opportunities. Universities had signed collaboration agreements, and cultural institutions had planned ambitious exchange programs. Sir Edmund Harwick reviewed the substantial list of concrete achievements with satisfaction, knowing that successful state visits were measured not just by their ceremonial excellence, but by their lasting impact on bilateral relations. The visit had exceeded expectations in producing tangible results that would benefit both nations. Hans Weber coordinated the German delegation's departure preparations while reflecting on how smoothly every aspect of the visit had proceeded. His experience with international diplomacy had taught him that seamless state visits required months of preparation and flawless execution by hundreds of dedicated professionals. The farewell ceremony was designed to be more intimate than the arrival celebrations, allowing for personal expressions of gratitude while maintaining appropriate dignity. The private family moments between the two couples provided touching evidence of the genuine relationships that had developed. Young Prince George presented President Mueller with a drawing he had made during the visit, depicting the German and British flags flying together over Buckingham Palace. The president was visibly moved by the gesture, promising to display the artwork prominently in his office as a reminder of the visit's personal dimensions. Lady Catherine Pemberton supervised the final protocols with her characteristic attention to detail ensuring that every aspect of the departure would reflect the same excellence that had characterized the entire visit. Her pride in the royal household's performance was evident as she watched the seamless coordination of complex logistics. The media coverage of the visit's conclusion emphasized both its ceremonial success and substantive achievements. Royal correspondent Sarah Matthews reported that the visit had demonstrated how traditional diplomacy could address contemporary challenges while strengthening relationships that transcended political changes. "This has been a masterclass in diplomatic hosting," she observed in her final broadcast. The royal household has created an environment where serious international business could be conducted within a framework of genuine hospitality and mutual respect. The German delegation's departure was marked by the same precision and warmth that had characterized their arrival, with palace staff lining the courtyard to bid farewell to guests who had become friends during their stay. The genuine smiles and expressions of gratitude from both sides reflected the visit's human success alongside its diplomatic achievements. Ambassador Heinrich Zimmermann felt deep satisfaction as he watched President Muller's motorcade prepare for departure. Years of diplomatic groundwork had contributed to this moment, and the visit's success would facilitate his ongoing work to strengthen ties between the two nations. Mrs. Eleanor Ashworth and her team began the process of returning the state apartments to their normal configuration, but she knew that the memories of this particular visit would remain vivid for years to come. The combination of perfect execution and genuine warmth had created something special that transcended routine diplomatic hospitality. As the presidential motorcade departed through the palace gates, both King Charles and President Mueller waved from their respective cars with obvious reluctance to see the visit end. Their final conversation had included firm commitments to continue their collaboration and plans for reciprocal visits that would further strengthen their partnership. The success of the state visit resonated far beyond its immediate participants, influencing public opinion in both countries and providing a positive example of how democratic nations could work together to address shared challenges. Media coverage emphasized the substantive achievements alongside the ceremonial magnificence. Dr. Margaret Thornton, writing her analysis of the visit for academic publication, noted how it had demonstrated the continued relevance of traditional diplomacy in an increasingly complex world. The combination of personal relationship building and substantive policy discussions had produced outcomes that benefited both immediate bilateral relations and broader international cooperation. The palace staff, who had worked tirelessly to ensure the visit's success, took pride in knowing they had contributed to an event that would be remembered as a high point in Anglo-German relations. Their professional excellence had created the foundation for diplomatic achievements that would benefit both nations for years to come. As evening fell over Buckingham Palace, the building returned to its normal rhythms, but the impact of the historic state visit would continue to influence the relationship between Britain and Germany. The personal friendships forged during 3 days of intensive diplomacy had created bonds that would endure beyond political changes, ensuring continued cooperation between two nations committed to democratic values and international partnership.